everyone for coming out for the 2012 Annual Domestic Violence Candlelight Vigil. My name is Jerald Monahan. I have the privilege and honor of being the Chief of Police here in Apache Junction. As we get started, I'd like to acknowledge several members of our council. We have tonight with us Councilmember Dave Waldron, Councilmember Gail Evans, Councilmember Robin Barker with us tonight. Several department heads are with us also. We have our city manager, Mr. George Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman, thank you for being here. And our city attorney, Joel Stern, is with us tonight. Joel, thank you. Always appreciate your support. And making our opening comments tonight is our mayor, John Insalaco. Hi.
Thank you, Chief. This is what happens with total knee replacements, but thank God for doctors that know what they're doing. You know, this is probably my fourth year of doing this, and crowds get bigger every year. And you know, it's hard. I know domestic violence has been with us since the beginning of time, but you got to understand something. It's awful hard for me to understand how a husband or a wife can beat the heck out of their spouse 1 minute and then say I love them in the next minute. I never knew that. Growing up with an older Italian family, thank God for my father. He never laid a hand on my mother that I know of, and we were there all the time. Well, first of all, she would have kicked out of him if you would have. Because when they say an Italian man ruins a family, don't believe it. It's mama. But you know, and so it really makes it. Well, I understand it happens, but it's hard for me to see how somebody can do that. 1 minute say I love you, and then the next minute, you know, oh yeah, mom and dad, they got their little squabbles. Dad go out in the garage and work on the cabinets, or then come back in the house and everything was done, you know, and they blew off their steam that way instead of using their fist. But you know, I commend our police department and everybody that's worked on this project, because it could do nothing but get better, and maybe we can stop this one of these days.
Thank you, Mayor. This city is involved in many activities to address issues around domestic violence, and with the support of this mayor and council, and the support of my boss, the city manager, and department heads like Joel Stern, and the wonderful men and women of the Apache Junction Police Department, we're able to do things that are much bigger than just Apache Junction. And tonight we have a couple of speakers that will present some information to you. And then at the end of the evening, I'd like to present just a number of the programs that your police department is actively involved in, and give you an opportunity to see that we are, in fact, making a difference, even though reading the headlines from time to time, it feels like we may not be. Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the new CAFA director of the Community Alliance Against Family Abuse. We are very, very fortunate here in Apache Junction to have a shelter located right here in town. CAFA's been here for a number of years. We have a number of the board members that are here with us as well, and I can't see you all out there from where I'm standing, but thank you for the CAFA staff that's here with us, and the CAFA board. But it'd be my pleasure to introduce you to Elizabeth Ditlevson Garman, who is our new director. And just a little bit of information about her before I ask her to come up and speak to you. Her background, in July of 2005, she began working as a victim advocate for the Sojourner Center in Phoenix. January of 2006, she went over to the Arizona Coalition Against Domestic Violence as a training coordinator, worked her way up to deputy director, and for the past year, she's been the interim director of the Arizona Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And that organization is a wonderful partner, not only to us here in Apache Junction, but all around the state. And the Chiefs Association has just the utmost respect for the Arizona Coalition, and that's in part due to your leadership, Elizabeth. She has a Bachelor's of Arts, majoring in sociology. She graduated from Cornell College, and it's my pleasure to ask her to come up and say a few words to us, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Chief Monahan. As Chief said, my name is Elizabeth Ditlevson Garman. I'm the Executive Director at the Community Alliance Against Family Abuse. I want to direct everyone's attention to the red silhouettes behind where people are sitting and standing. Last year, 104 people lost their lives in Arizona in domestic violence related incidents, and tonight we celebrate those who survived, but we also mourn the lives of those who've been lost. And the the 9 silhouettes behind you all contain the stories of people who lived in Pinal County in our communities who were murdered by their partners, their husbands, and in one case by their father. This May, my parents were visiting from Minnesota because I was getting married, and they were helping us prepare. And that week, we got a call that my mother's cousin had been, I didn't expect to get emotional, had been strangled to death. And he then started the house on fire and killed himself to try to cover the scene. And I've been doing this work for 12 years, and as a self-protection, people start to become abstractions. And the silhouettes behind you, the scenes you respond to, the people that you work with are people's sisters and daughters and mothers and friends and cousins. And as hard as this work is, it's important for us to remind ourselves each day of the realness of this issue. And with 1 in 4 women experiencing domestic violence in our communities, how many people's lives are touched and altered. And CAFA is so proud to serve Apache Junction in northern Pinal County by providing a safe shelter, support groups, one-on-one support. We also have legal advocacy and a 24-hour crisis hotline. And we encourage you to partner with us, to refer people to us, to call us, and then to just share that we're here in the community to serve people who are experiencing domestic violence. And I thank you so much for being here and for recognizing the Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And again, it's certainly our honor to have you on board here with CAFA. Tonight is about honoring those that survived and about remembering those that have been lost in Pinal County. We have for our keynote speaker this evening, Deana Monk. It was my pleasure to meet Deana several years ago at a Governor's Commission to Prevent Violence Against Women meeting, where she told her story of survival. She could have very easily have been a homicide statistic. And I'll certainly, she'll share her story with us, but she now works as a victim advocate, a legal advocate for the Timeout Shelter in Payson, and is actively working to assist others that are trapped in abuse. So Deana, if I could have you come to the stage.
Hello, I'm Deana Monk, and thank you everybody for coming tonight to honor the many loved ones who we've lost to domestic violence this year. I have some notes here, it just helps keep me directed. I imagine our presence here tonight is also to identify ourselves as someone who cares and someone who wants to help, and many here work daily in Arizona to end domestic violence. I'm here to tell my story as a survivor of domestic violence, and I hope to inspire the continued efforts of all of you here tonight. Domestic violence is one big fish to fry, and we have our work cut out for us. It is a complex web, and there are so many agencies and programs involved working toward a solution for both victims and abusers, and I am thankful for them all. We can be assured that much is being done, and that the passion for the total eradication of domestic violence runs deep here in Apache Junction and in Arizona. The realization that I am a survivor and here tonight is not lost on me. I am deeply grateful to be here. My story demonstrates that domestic violence cannot be predicted by your upbringing, by your choice in a mate, or weakness of personal character. We can move past those myths right now. I was brought up in a home with 2 loving parents. Substance abuse nor violence was demonstrated in any way. In fact, I grew up living my dream, riding and showing horses. And the other thing, I obtained a bachelor's degree in chemistry, so it's not just the uneducated. I held a rewarding full-time job. It's not just the unemployed. I was independent, self-confident, and I was actually married for 15 years before my husband demonstrated even one hint that he was capable of domestic violence. At that time, our marriage was struggling. He was drinking heavily at that time, and I did ask for separation. And what I learned is that when the relationship is perceived as threatened, that can be a time when someone who's capable of domestic violence can appear. The threat that it can escalate or intensify or begin. And unfortunately, all 3 began for me the day I asked for separation. Also, one thing I didn't know was that when somebody chooses to leave a domestic violence situation, that is the most dangerous time for them. The chances of them ending up in a lethal domestic violence occurrence rises exponentially. And my husband's response to my request for separation forever changed my life. He told me that under no terms will I leave, and that if I did, he would hunt me and our children down and kill me. He said that life is not worth living if we're not together as a family, and that he would rather us all be in heaven versus divorced and living separately. My response was shock, but I also stood up to him and said, hey, you don't have the right to tell me that I can't leave. I asked him to be reasonable. He went to the next level very quickly after that of threats and said not only would he kill me and my children, but he would kill my mother and my sister and anyone who aided us in fleeing. I brought up the issue of the police. He did not have any intimidation as regard to prosecution. Some abusers, that is not an issue for them, and that was the case here. I did back down completely at this point. I was in utter paralysis. I did not know what to do. What I know now is that there are many services for domestic violence victims, but when a domestic violence victim is in their trauma tunnel, those services aren't necessarily visible to them, and they don't perceive their options. And not negating what is available, but there are also gaps in services and that are very real, and getting through the legal system while trying to protect yourself and your children is easier said than done. I had the heavy load of realizing that I would not just be fighting for my own rights, but my children, who were 5 and 6 years old at the time, and my mother, sister, or anyone who helped me. I couldn't figure out how to do it. I couldn't figure out how to protect us all, and I felt very confused and angry, but I did feel the situation to be hopeless. So I stayed. I had no doubt of his sincerity to act in the manner he laid out. I can't explain it, but it is a look in his eyes, a tone in his voice, body language, and a screaming intuition in my gut that he meant what he said. He would put reminders in our life. He would cut out newspaper articles that related to some woman being murdered and place them on my side of the bed. He would, when a TV expose would feature a murder-suicide, he would nudge me and say, see, it really does happen. And he would just blatantly ask me every so often if I had any dangerous ideas of leaving. On 2 separate occasions, he did physically assault me, injuring me quite severely. I I was left with bruises and concussions, and I'm not sure which was worse. There were also times where he would put my head in the pool back and forth, dunking it, and showing me that he could drown me at any moment. He held me over the second-story balcony, letting me know that at any point he could just let go and I would fall. Power and control. It was a classic domestic violence trait that he was displaying. However, at the time, I did not know that. I kept all this in utter silence. I did not tell even one person. I felt like I was betraying myself by my silence, but I felt a stronger responsibility to keep those around me safe. One day my answer came. It wasn't in the form I expected. One day he came in and said, "I want a divorce from you. I'm sick of you." And within 2 weeks, I procured myself a new residence, and for the first time in a long time, in 3 years, I felt hope. And I felt set free. We lived apart for 9 months, and we had no major incidences, no problems. But one day that changed. I went out on a date with another man, and he found out through mutual friends. I was called, and I was told that I was not to date again. I listened to his 2 hours of ranting and raving at me, because at that moment he had the children. It was his week, and I was trying to calm him down so that the children, I was worried about their safety. At 6 a.m. the next morning, he called me and he said, "Come get the children. They're not safe with me." Luckily, his tone was despondent. I didn't know what I'd find when I got there, but when I did come to the residence, he surrendered the children to me, and we were, for several days went by, he called and said he wanted to talk about what happened, and I said, "I'm not comfortable meeting you." But still, I had not told anyone about these incidences, and so I said, "Let's meet at a public place," and became apparent very quickly, even in a public place, I was not safe. He had an agenda, and his agenda was clear. He stated, "We are leaving together, and we're going back home, and you're coming back to me." And luckily, this particular park had a police substation in it, and I could see police officers, and for the first time ever, I reached out, and I said, "I need help." And I explained what was happening. They let me leave with my children. There was no arrest made. Later that night, I spent the night in a hotel, and I called my parents, and for the first time, I told them what was happening and why I was in the hotel and that I needed help. Because at that point, he was basically unrecognizable in appearance, agitated, and scaring me beyond the point where I could handle it anymore by myself. I was ready to make a try. And when I called the police that night from the hotel, I asked him, "What do I do?" And he said, "Go get an order of protection and a gun." And I wasn't real comfortable. I'd never owned a gun before. So I decided to go with the other option, and I went the next day and went to Superior Court, Maricopa County, and got an order of protection. I did know that by doing that, that I felt that that was the beginning of the end. I was taking actions that would provoke his threats to be implemented, and it took all the courage I had to do a seemingly simple thing, which was to get an order of protection and have it served. But I did understand that my fears were well-founded, and that this order from a judge had no power to control him, and in fact it did elicit more anger and retaliation from him. He called and left horrific voicemails. I presented every violation. He camped in my backyard. I presented all the violations to the City of Phoenix Police Department. A charge of aggravated harassment was placed. Later, that charge would be downgraded to a misdemeanor termed interfering with judicial proceedings. That was a real blow for me. There was no consequences for at that particular time. I did take my safety in my own hands, and I my parents had a travel trailer, and I went into a secluded area and lived in this travel trailer, and I took my kids out of school. I changed my routines. I lost my job. I changed everything. Luckily, my family did support me, and they also took many chances for their own safety in an effort to be present with me in my darkest hour. My abuser's court date for the many violations to the order of protection was on May 20th, and he would never appear to answer for his behavior because on May 9th, 2008, 4.5 years ago, he found us. And it is by the grace of God that my children, our children, were at their grandparents' house, as I had actually arranged for a much-needed break to go out to a concert with a friend. I did have a more relaxed stance at that point because his family, my abuser's family, had told me that he was in Oregon, and they said that they would notify me immediately should he leave. I did move back to my house once I found out that he was in Oregon. I was quite done with living in a 15-foot trailer, and but he deceived his family as well, and he told them that he was going to visit a friend, and in fact, he bought a one-way train ticket to Phoenix. He parked his car in a tow-away zone. He had no intention of returning. When that night, on May 9th, we were walking out the garage door, and the garage door was open, and we were just making last-minute preparations to leave when somebody walked out from the dark into my garage, and all I saw was the whites of his teeth, and then I saw a gun by his side. We were rounded up, me and my friend, into the house, and he shut the door behind him. I was pretty much immediately asked to lay down face first on the floor, and in that controlling atmosphere, I was going along with it. My friend yelled out to me, "No, Deana, don't do it." And at that point, somehow I ended up in a headlock that had me actually off my feet, and I had the gun right here, and lots of horrible things were said. I realized at that point that I might die, and I started begging with him that, you know, it doesn't have to be this way. We can figure something out. I'll let you see the kids. I was saying anything. And my friend was also saying, hey, come on, we can come to a peaceful resolution to this. And at that time, I was facing my friend, and I could see the look on his eyes. He was looking at me and looking at the door, and looking at me and looking at the door, and that was an escape. And I can't know his thoughts, but my intuition said that he was wanting to leave and escape, but he didn't want to leave me there either, alone. And he was my hero that night, and he did stay. He did approach my abuser that threw him off, and I did take that officer's advice that night. Took me a while, but I did purchase a handgun, and at that time, when I had it under lock and key, of course, because my children, I didn't want it to be discharged accidentally, and but time just slowed down, and I just walked right up to that safe, opened it, I had unlocked it, I had the gun in my hand, and I heard this bam, bam. Only it wasn't my weapon that discharged. I just ran. It was just an instinct. I ran out of the house, and I was screaming for help, and my neighbors called the police, and I saw my abuser come out of the house and was yelling at me, Deana, come back. And he tried to hotwire my car to escape. However, when it became apparent that the police were responding, he went back into the house and barricaded himself. My friend was shot through the heart in the back twice. They do say he died instantly. Later on that, as the SWAT team arrived, I was told that my abuser sat on the couch and turned the gun on himself, and he was successful in his suicide attempt. I was the only survivor. I drove off the block that night. I felt guilty. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to tell my kids about their dad. Mental health issues didn't seem to describe it fully, but they were pretty young. We have had help. We've had a lot of help through a lot of agencies, me and my kids, and we have gone through grief counseling. We have family support. We have community support. And we know we are not alone, and it does take a village to get somebody through this. We are thriving today. My kids are 13 and 14 years old now, and although this experience still affects us, we are not defined by it, and we do have a future. Not all, we're so lucky, as the silhouettes demonstrate. Currently, I am the lead advocate at the Timeout Shelter in Payson. We do have a 28-bed facility. We're the only emergency shelter within a 100-mile radius up in Gila County. And I am blessed to be able to serve in that capacity. There are many ways to serve, however, one of them being a board of director for a facility, very important job. There's a need for teams to form for domestic violence fatality review. And there's always the donation of time and money to agencies such as Arizona Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the Apache Junction Police Department, who go above and beyond in their dedication to promote domestic violence awareness and solutions. Sometimes the audience gives a standing ovation to a survivor as they leave. And tonight, I would like us all to just stand and shake your neighbor's hand and say, thank you, everybody. We're all working this together, and thank you for letting me be here tonight. Good night, and God bless.